It's no secret that the industry is moving to the cloud, but what are the hidden costs of adopting a cloud solution? That's what I want to talk about today. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney. For over 25 years, I have drafted and negotiated a variety of technology-related contracts and litigated failed ERP projects in courts across the country. Implementations are not easy, despite what software vendors might tell you about the implementation of cloud software. And while I think cloud software can be cheaper in some instances to implement than legacy on-prem software, it's still a substantive project, and it's going to take time, and it's not going to be easy. To characterize it as something that is, not substantive, it's not going to take a long time, it's not going to cost very much money, that's simply not true. I think it's safe to say that even the implementation of cloud software is going to be more complicated than you expect. It's going to take longer than you expect, and it's going to cost more than you expect. So, the first hidden cost associated with this is really the complexity and the cost of the implementation of that cloud software. The other cost you really need to think about is the cost of devoting internal resources to the success of the implementation project. And what I mean by that is, these implementations don't happen in a vacuum. You've got to lean on your internal staff, who may already be stretched very thin because they're focusing on their real full-time day jobs, but at the same time they're having to take resources away from those jobs and focus on the implementation project. There is a cost associated with that. You also are most likely going to engage, I would think, full-time project managers or team members that are going to be primarily focused or full-time focused on that project. Certainly there's a cost associated with that, but I think the intangible cost is really that people are going to be taking time away from their full-time jobs, and you need to have a strategy for mobilizing your internal team, for taking on the resource hit that is going to give you. You have to think about utilizing subject matter experts from your internal team. You want to have a strategy for backfilling those resources when they're focusing their time on the implementation project. You need to backfill the resource so that day job is still being fulfilled. So certainly there is going to be an internal cost or a cost associated with utilizing your internal resources for this project that really, I think very much is a hidden cost. The other thing that you really want to think about is, how are you going to transition away from that legacy system? You are going to currently be paying for that system during the implementation and integration of your new system because you need to utilize something to operate your business. But what's that process going to look like? Are you going to be able to flip a switch and be able to transition your data out of there in an efficient, well-timed manner? Or are you going to need to leave certain legacy data in that system and access it through that system on a going forward basis? There's going to be a cost associated with that. There's going to be a cost with transitioning your data out of that system into the new system. I think you need to be aware that the term of your ability to use and access that software, that legacy software, is not necessarily going to align perfectly with your new software. So there may be overlap. I mean, what if you've got 3 more years on your term for the legacy software and you're starting to use and transition away from it? I mean, you've got to think about how you're going to balance these costs. I think one of the other issues you want to consider with respect to a legacy system is, are you going to be doing a phased implementation approach? Are there going to be different portions of your business, different business units that are going to go live on the new system but still need to utilize that legacy system? So you've got to think about the cost associated with accessing your data from that legacy system, how you're going to utilize that legacy system on a going forward basis if you need to at all. The biggest cost that you've got to think about really is the fact that in every implementation, there is going to be some level of operational disruption, and that is par for the course. What happens is you go live on Monday, and Tuesday you're in disarray. And I think that disarray can take many forms. If you're lucky, there's going to be minimal disruption, but that's not particularly common. I think what is more common is that there is going to be some sort of substantive impact on your ability to ship product, your ability to invoice your customers, your ability to reach out to your customers through your CRM system or whatever. And that could have a reasonable financial impact on you that you need to account for. These cloud systems, while they may be easier in some respects to implement than legacy on-premise systems, and they're certainly touted that way, it's not necessarily true. There's still substantial risk associated with those, and it's still a substantive project. And I think the likelihood that you're going to encounter operational disruption and there's going to be a cost associated with that is very, very high. One of the other costs and risks that you need to really think about is that it is almost always unlikely that you are going to realize all of your expected business benefits. And there is a cost associated with that. What you don't want to have happen is for you to have spent millions of dollars on this new software system to replace your old system, and it's nominally better in key areas than your legacy system, or it is of equal functionality, or hopefully not. It's got worse functionality than your legacy system, and we've seen that before. That is something that I don't know how you can quantify the impact of not realizing the expected business benefits, but there's got to be an accounting of that. You've got to take it into consideration where it is going to be virtually certain that you're not going to realize all of the expected business benefits, and there's going to be a cost associated with that. The other cost that I think really comes to the forefront with respect to cloud software is that you're perpetually leasing software. And while it may be less expensive on the front end and your cost outlay might be cheaper, you're going to be subject to an initial term. You're going to be subject to subsequent terms, and if you're smart and you're lucky, you will be able to cap any kind of increases on a yearly basis for the duration of the term, for maybe a couple terms, whatever you're able to negotiate. But the reality is that you're going to be paying to access and utilize that software for the life cycle of that product's life. And it's a substantively different model than the traditional perpetual license model where you pay it off at some point and you can still use it. I mean, this is very much like a lease. And I think when you're trying to make a rational decision about what costs you can expect, this one has to really be taken into consideration because it can be a substantive cost. I hope you found this information useful. If you have any questions about anything I've talked about in this video, please feel free to reach out to me at taftlaw.com. I'd love to talk to you. Thank you.